Hey, good morning, everybody. This is very awkward as I'm sitting in front of you as we speak, but our guest lecturer for today for our audio production class is actually an Auburn Montgomery grad. She was a communication and theater alumnus, was a School of Liberal Arts representative, a member of the Theater AUM Guild, and has been in dozens of productions and showcases across the Southeast. Sam Blakely is currently living and working in Birmingham, and most relevant to our class, has a lot of experience producing digital content and specifically podcasts. She's produced segments for The Rice Firm with Birmingham public interest lawyer Richard Rice, the Alabama Bicentennial Commission, and a few more projects here and there. It's my pleasure to introduce you, my good friend Sam Blakely. Hey, Sam.
Hey, Kyle. Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor.
Yay, cool. Go Warhawks, right?
Yeah, Warhawks.
Yeah,
Nation.
we get a nickel every time we say that.
Oh, I need to say it about 10,000 times.
Well, cool. Yeah, so you've had a bunch of experience working on podcasts and stuff before, and like I said, I do appreciate you, kind of taking the time to talk with us, especially because I know that you're busy. As of right now, it's almost 9 o'clock, and I'm sure that you're just like, great, yeah, this sounds like a lot of fun. What were the biggest lessons that you learned while you were making your podcasts?
So, biggest lessons I learned, definitely planning. That's one of the things I learned. Just going in with a plan, kind of writing things out. I don't necessarily like to go in with a full, okay, so these are the questions I'm going to ask, and this is what they're going to answer, and this is, I like it to be more free-flowing. I think it is more natural. I think people tend to gravitate towards that more.
Having that conversational tone is it goes a long way, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. Podcast is growing exponentially. And people really like that style, it seems. People are really into the kind of conversational flowing, everyday, just between friends type style. So
what do you think about the audio quality? I've heard a lot of different discussions about what your file needs to be and the specific sample rate and all these technical things.
Well, I think that because there's so many podcasts coming out, you're definitely, you can't kind of just let it fall by the wayside.
Yeah.
So I think it's very important. I think it's something to look at when you're purchasing your equipment, when you're setting up, little technical things am I going to get a snowball that'll pick up, the sounds around me, that, just things like that.
Sure.
I also do believe that, like you said in the beginning, you work with what you got.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what I had to do. I had a MacBook and a snowball microphone. And I just, I used the skills that Neil David taught me. Okay, so this might not be loud enough. This might sound, okay, well, I'm going to speak as clearly and as loudly as possible. So,
I love that. Yeah, so
like that to make it work.
Yeah, and kind of speaking of that, that's I guess what your recording process was like. Like the early equipment that you used was just basically a MacBook and a pretty cheap USB mic then?
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it worked. It fooled people.
Oh, yeah. You would be surprised. I think nowadays, the barrier of entry is so low. I mean, you could probably get away with a phone if it's just you. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And there's all these host radios from your iPhone or Droid or whatever type things popping up, on Instagram and things I've seen. And I'm like, wow, you can do a lot of stuff from your phone.
For sure. What about hosting? I know that you said that you used some hosts before. Are there any tools that worked for you that you really liked?
Well, I know the producer, he had put it on Podbean.
Okay.
And iTunes and SoundCloud.
Yeah.
And that we got the most from I want to say the Podbean link, simply because the iTunes, something happened with the account, so it was a little wonky. So I can't really say, iTunes, we had a good experience with iTunes, but that's probably a technical thing on our part. But the Podbean link really worked. We seemed to get the most downloads from that.
Yeah, did you guys use analytics to track your audience and see where your audience was?
Yeah, so our producer at the time, he did a lot of that. He did, well, all of that. And he, kept up with it. We could see the nice thing about like Podbean and those type things. You can see how many downloads you have and all that good stuff, like where it's being shared. So that was really nice for the analytical side of it.
I never took the voice for the actor class that Theater AUM and the AUM offers, and I know that Neil David is a treat. And kids just in the audience right now, if you've never had Neil David, you've got to take him at least once. What about the vocal performance in particular would you think, if you've never taken the voice for the actor class, people need to know?
So as far as the vocal performance, that's actually how it's funny. So the radio show that I'm working with,
right.
Results with Richard Rice. So I was working at the bank, and we have a microphone there, and he was just like, like your voice is really clear, and I can hear what you're, like that's a crappy microphone, but like I can hear what you're saying, like you have a good voice, blah, 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 And so that's how I got started with him. I actually was like, oh yeah, I worked in the podcast world and I do this, that, and the other. So, so that's how I landed my gig.
Wow.
So,
yeah.
It's very important to, take into account your vocal quality when producing podcasts and radio, because that's all they have to go by.
Sure. Yeah.
So it's, it's very important, the clarity of your voice, because Neil David, you're right, he is a gem. I would get, mush mouth because I'd get a little too conversational. I'd be like, yeah, I know I'm saying, yeah, anyway, and it's like, if I want people to hear what I'm saying and understand, I can't always talk like Cardi B. You see what I'm saying? So,
yeah.
So I think that it's very important to, before you do your podcast or radio show or any type of vocal production in general, just kind of take time to breathe, check your breathing, center yourself, test your volume, and kind of test your, kind of going a little deep in the waters here, but like your resonators.
Yeah.
That's one thing so the people in there who've taken like Neil David's voice class, they'll kind of know what I'm talking about. So the resonator balance, that's something that's really important in vocal quality, because for some reason the human ear likes a nice balanced resonant voice. So it helps with your clarity, helps you with your volume, so you can kind of get away with not having the best microphone in the world if you just up your vocal quality.
When you're creating your podcast, that's obviously a little bit different than working on the radio, and you've got experience kind of in both of those realms. Do you think, like, which one is more polished or less polished, if that makes any sense?
I like both of them a lot. I love the freedom that you have with podcasts, because you're just, you're recording it and you're, doing what you're going to do. You got your plan, you kind of know how things are going to go. As far as radio, there have just been, like, for instance, our radio show centers around topics in a community that, are controversial.
Sure.
So there's times when you have people who, call in and, they're cussing and they're doing stuff. You have to take them off. And it's just, there's little awkward things about radio that you don't experience. I'm learning to love all of it, but there is a nice, there's something nice about being able to kind of control the conversation in podcasts in a way that you can't in radio.
Yeah, and it's weird too, because I would kind of, coming into that question initially, I would think like, oh, radio has to be a lot more polished. But, when you listen to some of the, the more technical podcasts with a lot of, budget and effects and stuff, it's crazy it's almost like making a movie. What do you think your proudest segment or episode was? Is there anything that really stuck out to you that you was really proud of?
So I really, the podcast I was just referring to, the one that I made, wrote, produced, all that stuff by myself, because the producer was away. He was gone at the time. I was really proud of that because it just showed me, I can do this. May not be the most tech savvy girl in the world, but this can be done.
Right.
And so I really liked that, and I liked being able to control the way it went. I liked doing the interviews.
Mm-hmm.
So I went out to Fort Toulouse and interviewed one of the resident archaeologist guys out there and a couple other people.
Yeah, and just as a refresher, this is for the Alabama Bicentennial, which celebrated the Alabama's 200th birthday. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes, we were trying to raise, get people excited, raise awareness about the Bicentennial coming up, which is this year, actually.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there was like a big event going on at Fort Toulouse, so we were trying to draw people in and get them excited. So I really enjoyed that because I had, all the hands-on.
I guess kind of like wrapping things up, do you have any big rules that you broke when you were first starting out?
Just kind of circling back around to the rambling.
Yeah.
So, my producer and I, we were just experimenting, with different things. And there's an episode, and it's out there in the universe, of me and him just talking about like bananas, or like we're supposed to be talking about Alabama and how it's 366 miles long. That's our job. That's what we're getting paid to do. And it's like, we just said, we'll just go in, and just make it conversational, make it, just kind of spur of the moment. And it was not a good idea. Some people have that and they can just do that and stay on track. I realized I'm not one of those people. Another kind of rule is just one thing that I really noticed is, and Neil David kind of told us this as well, you don't have to lose like yourself or your accent or your, like, not to sound cliche, just be yourself and, present, the best self you can, but still being yourself. And that's kind of how I've gotten, to be, I've gotten more involved, I've gotten more successful at what I'm doing. So that, we were talking about voice clarity and all that stuff. So yeah, watch the articulation, the diction and things, but you can still have that twang because people think it's cute.
Well, and that's the funny thing too. All of these production classes that we're, talking about and everything, it is part science. Like, you need to know the rules and the conventions, and it goes for video production or for acting or for whatever. But, a big part of it too is the art, the subjectivity of it. And, I think you're totally right. Like, in the realm of podcasts, there are just hundreds of thousands out there, and they're so good. Like, there are people who have genuinely really worked their ass off, and, they've really produced a lot of great products. But, you've got to find a way to stick out amongst that, especially if you're talking about something like, I know that you love Alabama. I know that, you're an Alabama girl through and through, but I'm sure that, for the Alabama Bicentennial, you weren't like necessarily ecstatic about the concept of like, talking about archaeology or whatever.
Yeah, but it was a cool experience. Framing that in a way that, okay, I may not be the most excited about it, but I need to get people on board. So, how can I get on board and how can I get other people? So it was a nice challenge.
Yeah, I really do appreciate all your insights, and I hope that, the kids do too. At this point, hopefully I'm not, just playing this back to myself. I need to look around and make sure that there's people still in the room. But I was kind of, just wondering, I guess as a last question or whatever, we've got some seniors who are graduating, and you were in their position, just like I was. You were in their seat in that exact classroom. Do you have any kind of recommendations for those of you about to graduate and start looking for big boy and big girl jobs?
Absolutely. So do your homework. And I'm going to say what Val Winkleman always says, make good choices. So besides those two things, just kind of figuring out what you don't want to do can kind of help you get to where you want to go.
Yeah.
And I don't think we're taught to do that as much. I think we're taught, go somewhere and work there and you're going to retire there and it's whatever. So I would just encourage exploration of self, exploration of your interests, exploration of your values, and just kind of go from there and go with your gut, and you'll end up in a good place.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Sam. I do appreciate you for answering this call at around 9 o'clock at night.
Hey, no
Yeah,
worries.
I appreciate it, and I know that the kids do too. If it's okay with you, I'm going to give them your email, and in case any of them have any questions, I'm sure that you might have one or two that are interested in where they can access podcasts that you've done, or I'm kind of putting you on the spot because if you said no, I don't know what I'd do.
Yeah, no, actually, Kyle, I'm super busy now. No,
Yeah. Well, I do
that is
appreciate it,
100%.
seriously. Everybody, this has been Sam Blakely, and thank you so much again for talking to the class. Well, Professor Edwards, I think I'm going to hand this over to you. Thank you again, Sam.
Absolutely.
All right, bye.